Intelligence, simple idea, but one of those things that we really cannot zone in terms of definition. We really don't know. We can't describe it properly. So therefore, there are so many theories of intelligence. There are so many ways in which people view intelligence. Um, in terms of definition, it's a very broad-handed stroke, right? So is the ability to acquire knowledge, to think, to reason effectively, and to deal adaptively with the environment, right? So very vague definition if you really think of it. It's to acquire knowledge, which is again about learning, to think, which is cognition, to reason, cognition, dealing adaptively with the environment is basically everything that human beings do. So again, it's a very vague definition. This because the concept is not like there's no clear understanding of intelligence, right? It's far too broad and there are too many types and there's too much discussion about it. So it's a very broad stroke definition. Uh, there are two major approaches that we've come across when psychologists try and understand intelligence. One is psychometric, which is the way in which these mental competencies are understood as uh, parts of statistical analysis, right? So psychometric. So they look at the mind and the intelligence in terms of structures and types, right? What are the different types and what is the largest structure? Whereas the cognitive processes look at intelligence in terms of what are the things that are underlying that performance, right? So it's more performance based and then everything else that is underlying the performance. So two broad approaches, right? We'll start with the psychometric approach because this was the one that became famous first. So this is basically on the statistical study of intelligence, right? So there are observable measures. These are the things that intelligence is. There are lots of things, and then you use factor analysis to sort of break it down, and you come to components, and then you measure those smaller clusters, and you find which are the correlations, etc., right? So that's the basic approach of the psychometric studies. These are what are used in your clinics, right? Mostly psychometric approaches are used because it gives you a clear cut number of, okay, what is the score, what is the intelligence score, right? How can we differentiate between the entire group that we have? So the first person to study intelligence, right, in history for us, in like if you don't go back to the Greeks and philosophy, is Sir Francis Galton, right? This guy, interestingly, is related to Charles Darwin also. Okay, his idea of intelligence was in terms of reaction time. So this was a very interesting idea. He said people who are intelligent will react faster than people who are not intelligent, right? Now, at that time that he was there, it made sense, right? He did some experiments, provided some proof, but now it has not been replicated, obviously, right? In terms of hand strength, so therefore it sort of created a gender divide. Then sensory acuity, that is how sensitive someone's sensory systems are. And the most weird part was skull sizes. So he started comparing skull sizes of like people from different cultures and who was uh, like whose skull size was bigger means brain is bigger, therefore they're more intelligent, right? Believe that people from privileged backgrounds were more intelligent. Um, this is sort of supported by research where privilege and nurture and all of that does affect the IQ. But again, the IQ is itself not thought of as being the entire component of intelligence. So again, that makes it slightly more not very sure sort of space, right? And his mental skill measures were not valid and reliable because the results were not complying. However, in history, he's still remembered as the first guy who tried to understand intelligence, right? After that, we had Alfred Binet, one of the most important people as far as IQ testing of intelligence is concerned. Alfred Binet was commissioned by the French government to figure out how do you deal, how like what is the status of the children, how intelligent are the kids, what is the range, which are the kids who need help. So it was primarily to figure out people who had some form of intellectual disability and how best to approach it, right? So Binet and Simon actually they sort of conceptualized this together, but Binet was the first guy, and then Simon's test came later. So now it's known as the Binet-Simon test. There are two assumptions. One was that every human being's mental ability increases with age. Therefore, intelligence increases with age. The older you are, the more intelligent you are. And then rate of gaining competence is a personal characteristic. So although with age it will automatically increase, but you can also expedite that process by your own personal effort, right? So at some point when you're really old, people stop uh, gaining more intelligence because they just stop thinking about intelligence or they stop trying to gain intelligence. So it's a personal characteristic, right? They took the term intelligence quotient from William Stern. So Binet or Simon did not give the term IQ. IQ was given by William Stern. Albert and Binet together, they decided that, okay, the best measure to understand IQ is to take the mental age, which is based on the first assumption that mental abilities increase with age, divided by the second assumption that is chronological age. So if someone is more intelligent but younger in age, then therefore their personal characteristic of wanting to become intelligent is more. So mental age by chronological age into 100, you get the percentile, right? The percentage came much later. Initially, it was just MA by CA. But then when they had to use this as a diagnostic tool, then they had to figure out a way and they figured out percentages is the best way to go about it, right? Today, IQ is an individual score in comparison to norms of other individuals of the same age. So this IQ, the entire thing of where it goes from say 0 to 180 or whatever, and then average is around 100 and below 80 is borderline and below 70 is mild and all of that um, came later, right? And all of that actually was not the idea of Binet or Simon, right? Then you had Louis Terman, who created the Stanford Binet test, which is they used the same ideas of the Binet test, translated it into English, and this was in Stanford University. I don't know why it says Stanford. It's supposed to be Stanford University, and it had only verbal items, right? So the entire Binet Simon test had only verbal items. There were no performing items, right? Today's test, there are verbal and non-verbal items, right? We'll come to know why that is. Then you had Charles Spearman, right? Charles Spearman said that, oh, no, Binet too much. This is, wait, one second. Okay. So he said that Binet, actually before Spearman is Thurston, right? Um, so Thurston disagreed with Binet's conceptualization of intelligence. Like he didn't like it at all. And he said percentage is not a great system to figure out intelligence. And he was a proper psychophysics guy and he really liked numbers and statistics. So he used factor analysis, so he did a range of tests, right? Found a range of abilities, and then he found correlation between each of those abilities, right? And the stronger the correlation, he grouped them together, right? And so on and so forth until he arrived at these seven, which sort of shared high correlation among each other, but also were separate, uh, separate types of intelligence, right? One of the favorite questions for net is they'll ask you what method of factor analysis did Thurston use? So if there are options of orthogonal or oblique rotation, then these two are the ones that he used, right? Now you have to remember this. There's no other way that you can remember this, right? Just think of Thurston and double O's, and you'll realize that orthogonal and oblique rotation of factor analysis was used. So the seven distinct abilities were known as primary mental abilities, right? Thurston called them that these are the seven basic abilities that every human being has, but they have it in different amounts. So the first one was verbal comprehension, that is the ability to understand verbal speech. Then perceptual speech, that is the ability to sense and understand what is going on in the environment. Then there is number or numerical ability, that is the understanding of math and numbers. Then there is spatial visualization, that is the ability to understand distance, how someone is throwing, catch things, drive, that sort of space, right? Then there is associative memory, that is the ability to sort of go back and think about stuff and remember stuff. Then there's word fluency, that is the ability to speak clearly without any interruptions and there is no thought process that is going on, right? Just verbal ability of the written kind, basically. And then reasoning, that is the ability to problem solve, right? Uh, Now, these seven are not in order, right? They are not like verbal will come first, person. He said that they are born with seven and then different abilities develop differently, right? So I remember this as VPN SOAR. VPN is like the internet VPN, right? And SOAR is just, I remember it from the movie Saw, and R is for R rated. So this is the way I remember Thurston seven abilities, right? That is the thing with like internet and Saw movies that are rated R. Um, and each time this is thrown at me, I sort of remember what those are. Then we had Spearman. Spearman said there are seven is too many. Binet had no. What I'm saying is there are two types, right? There is one that is the general intelligence that everyone has, and then there is specific intelligence that different people have different specific intelligence. So general intelligence included the ability to problem solve, the ability to adapt to environment, the ability to learn, the ability to have memory, right? Just basic stuff that every human being has is general intelligence, right? That is also of different levels for everybody. Then there is specific intelligence. That is the ability to do some specific things, right? So for example, a carpenter has more intelligence about how to build a table than you do, right? You have more idea about how to use a laptop than someone who doesn't use a laptop, obviously, right? Um, Maybe I have the specific intelligence of teaching, right? And someone else has the specific intelligence of being a good therapist, right? Someone else has the specific intelligence of, say, like doing business, right? So everyone has the ability to memorize, everyone has the ability to learn, everyone has the ability to problem solve. And then we put it in different directions, and therefore we have specific intelligence in those spaces, right? So Spearman gave GNS factor, right? So I think of it as SGS. That is Spearman, general, specific. So sometimes you'll get confused with, there's another guy called Sternberg, right? So Sternberg's is what? Now Sternberg's is 3, Spearman's is 2, right? That's one of the ways that I remember it. Sternberg has 3 parts to his theory. Spearman has 2, and Spearman's is SGS, right? As you can think of it as like Sunil Gavaskar if you want, or SG Bats if you want, right? However you want to, but this sort of conceptualize it, right? Um, then you had Cuttle and Horn, right? Cuttle and Horn said, "Oh no, Spearman, general is too general, right? It's like so broad stroken that it can literally be anything. So why don't we break that, right? So now you have to think of Cattell and Horn, right, as fighting against Spearman, right? The funny thing is, all of these people, their names are representative of different like objects. So Cattell is like you can think of cows, Horn you can think of a cow with a horn, and Spearman you can think of somebody throwing a spear, right? So the cows didn't like the people who were throwing spears, which means that Cattell and Horn didn't like spearmen, and they said, no, general intelligence, 2 types. What are the 2? Crystallized and fluid, right? So they said that even within general intelligence, some people have the ability to use older information to apply to new information better than other people, right? Now, crystallized intelligence develops, right? And throughout life it keeps improving because as you get older you learn to solve different things, and therefore your crystallized intelligence keeps increasing, right? It's based on experience. So for example, if you've never lived away from home, right, you probably don't know how to manage everything as well as somebody who's lived at home, who's lived away from home. So for that person, crystallized intelligence is slightly higher in that aspect, right? One of the things that I have learned through my UG is how to steal electricity, right? Because I had gone home for some holidays and 2, 3 months we were not there and no one paid the electricity bill, so they cut it. And then when we came back, we didn't have electricity and they would take 2, 3 days to come, and we didn't have urban company at that point. So I had to learn how to, put those 2 wires together, where to pull it out from, and not have the fuse and the Kit Kat in the right place, right? Until the actual guys came and they fixed it. So now if I don't have electricity and some fuse, etc. takes place, I know what to do with the meter machine, right? This is crystallized intelligence. I didn't solve the problem. Someone told me how to do it and I did it. And now if there is some friend who has this problem, I will go and do it, right? So my crystallized intelligence in terms of stealing electricity is great. So that's how people gain expertise, right? That is, they build on their learnings on and on and on and on, and they get really good at particular things, right? So that's the creation of expertise through crystallized intelligence. So if you have to, if there sometimes they might ask, right, this is the form of intelligence that continues to grow throughout life. One of the tendencies is that because you hear fluid, you think that, oh, fluid means flowing, it might be forever, but that's not true, right? Crystallized intelligence is the thing that goes on forever, right? And therefore it's, so you have to think of experts, and experts have information that keeps growing and they keep getting better and better and better, right? So crystallized intelligence is the thing that keeps growing throughout life. Fluid intelligence, on the other hand, actually starts to decrease after a certain age, right? After you cross your early adulthood, it starts to sort of diminish because old people are rigid, right? That's the way I think of it. Fluid intelligence, old people are rigid, they don't have fluid intelligence, right? Which is the new ways to solve a problem, right? Uh, So these are not based out of personal experience, but you really have to think of the problem, conceptualize it, figure out a new way in which nobody has thought of it. So this requires you to engage in inductive reasoning, because deductive reasoning requires logic. Creativity does not require logic. It needs you to reason abstractly, logically, right? But also in a really random fashion. It also allows humans move from fluid to crystallized throughout life, right? So as you're a kid, you have a lot of imagination, a lot of stuff, and as you get older, you become more expert, right? Um, Another way to think of fluid intelligence is to think of a story where, for example, in physics, right? Uh, of all the people who won the Nobel Prize ever, right? Almost 85% or 90% of them won it before they turned 30, right? So it's a really amazing statistic. Like I think there are only two people in the history, in the entire thing, who won it after they turned 30, right? And now because like now I think it has increased, but more people win it when they find new theories, etc., before the age of 30. So even if they don't win it at that point, they win it because of something they created before the age of 30, right? Which gives you an understanding that uh, physics is sort of like more theoretically creative as a study. So fluid intelligence is high at that age, and therefore there are novel ways of feeling out different things that happen in the environment. Um, and then later, crystallized intelligence sort of takes over, right? So Kettle and Horn didn't like Spearman. They broke his general intelligence into crystallized and fluid. Fluid is more creative, more for young people. Crystallized is it goes on through life and you gain expertise as you get older, right? Uh, then you had Guilford, right? Guilford, Guilford said, "I don't care about any of you guys, right? I'm going to complicate this, and I'm going to really think about intelligence as vastly as I possibly can." So he said that there are totally your 16 different components of like 16 different components of intelligence, right? Which can be, if you want to really divide it, there'll be three matrix, right? The matrix of operation, product, and content. Each of them have different types of things under it, and you can combine all of them, and together you can have an intelligence matrix of almost 180 components, right? And everyone has a different amount of each component, and therefore there is so much difference in intelligence across human behavior. He also obviously used factor analysis. Sometimes this is known as the SI theory, sometimes factor analysis theory, sometimes very simply OPC model. OPC stands for operations, products, and contents, right? Now this much is okay. This is where it gets really random, right? He says that operations are what is going on in your mind, right? Basically, whatever you're thinking and whatever is going on here is operation, right? Larger ideas. Products are smaller parts of that object, of that operation. So when you have cognition, you have, say, small concept, then you put the concept in category, then you create relationships, then you have systems, and then you have like an entire system in place, right? And then your intelligence also has contents, right? The content is based out of your sensory systems usually. So visual, auditory, and symbolic representation. Semantic is in terms of meaning and behavior. Now the thing is, the good news is you don't have to know any of it. You don't need to know what any of it means as long as you remember what the contents are as far as the net exam is concerned, right? Uh, so that's the focus, right? Because if I have to explain each of these things, it makes no sense. However, products I'll explain to you because these are things that we are not sort of, you don't know, rest of you know. You know what is cognition, memory, divergent production, validation. You know these things on the right also, right? With products, there are 6 types. Okay. So products are basically the production of intelligence, right? So intelligence will produce things in terms of unit, that is single items of knowledge. Sometimes these units will be put in classes, that is their share common attributes and they're put together. They'll sometimes be related to each other. So these products that are created are related to one another, right? Then they'll be put into networks and systems, right? So your intelligence levels increases as the number of complicated products for everything that you're doing sort of increases, right? And then after that, the final level is to have like to rethink stuff and have like a transformative change and think of things in the way that you perceive the world. And sometimes you anticipate information, you start predicting stuff and all of that. So everyone has all six. It's just at different places we have it, right? Now the OPC model, right? Instead of calling it Guilford structure of thing, if you think of it as the OPC model, you think of operation, products, contents. O has 5 parts, P has 6 parts, C has 5 parts, right? So it's 5, 6, 5. O, P, C, 5, 6, 5. And then what are those five? For O, so I think of O as like a political thing. So I think of chief minister and district collector, and then E is just there, right? So CM, DCE. Products, I think of it in terms of UCR and STI. I just mucked this up, to be very honest with you, right? And contents is VASSB, which I think of it as saying base but with a V, right? So these are the techniques I have used to mock this up and never forget it, right? So OPC model, okay, O, fine, there is political, CM, DCE, 5 things done, right? Then you think of product, 6 things are there. What are those 6 things? UCR, STI. This is the most difficult thing for me to remember because there is no association that is there. And then there is contents. Contents is base with a V, right? So V, A, S, S, B.